Welcome to Creating Connection with me, your host, Dr. T, where we will navigate being human together. We'll do this through conversations, exploring the challenges and joys of life, uncovering insights and strategies to create meaningful connections, to foster personal growth and find solace in the collective wisdom of our diverse community. Drawing from a unique blend of academic expertise and personal experiences, I will dive into the joys and complexities of aging, death, dying, grief, and body image. With a blend of humor and compassion and understanding, we will forge connections that transcend geographical boundaries and unite us in our shared humanity. When we come together, the possibilities are endless. Creating Connection with me, Dr. T, starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. T, and you're listening to Creating Connection on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with me for the next hour as I discuss applying mindfulness to the experience of grief. So on that note, in this episode, I will be talking about grief and loss. So if this topic isn't helpful for you, or if it might be harmful for you in any ways, please don't listen. Take good care of you as always, and join me back here later this month as we'll dive into learning about nonviolent communication with my guest, Aya Caspi. Thank you all so much for being here. I get asked all the time, why do I study, teach, and talk about this topic? I recently found something I wrote 28 years ago. I had forgotten all about it. We've recently moved, as I've mentioned before, and I've had time to go through bins and things that I haven't, looked at in years and years. So this is something I wrote in September of 1995. Death is so hard to accept because we're lulled into the expectation of every day. We go about our lives expecting to see you later, see you Monday, or I'll get to it tomorrow. We know that everyone dies. It's part of life, right? But we glibly believe that tomorrow will come. And when it does, things will be the same. They better be the same, or it rocks our world. The loss of a job, friend, lover, parent, it catches us off guard and we mourn the loss. I don't believe this cycle has an answer, a beginning, or an end. If we value each moment, hold it up to the light, look at it, love it, hug it, will it hurt less when we ultimately lose it? Is there comfort in knowing that while this was a part of me, I appreciated it? Probably. It's far too easy to fall into the numb belief in tomorrow and forget to live and cherish today. What I love about my own thoughts, I'm to be serious. It moved me when I read that because I didn't know at the time, my little 25-year-old self, that I would eventually study, research, teach, and talk about this topic in the way that I do, especially bringing mindfulness to it, which is kind of that, that end part, what can we appreciate today? And cherishing these times and holding it close and hugging it to ourselves. And yes, that is one of the reasons why contemplating death and dying can be so powerful and impactful. Because when we contemplate, when we think about that these things don't last forever, or this too shall pass, it might help us appreciate those moments in between. And there's actually traditions where contemplating death helps you awaken to the preciousness of life. That doesn't make any of this easier. So about 8 years ago, I was working with Heather, who was on an earlier episode talking about communication with me. And she mentioned I was early in my graduate career. She said, do you know that you light up when you talk about grief? And I hadn't really realized it, but I do. Does that mean I love the experience of grief? Oh my gosh, no. Heck no. But I did find my way back to this important topic and began my deep dive into researching and studying it. One of the things that comes up for me the most is that grief really is a common denominator of being human. We all will experience loss in our life, and grief accompanies that loss. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter your race, religion, where you grew up. Being human, we will experience loss and grief. And so that is what brings me back and back again to bringing this topic to the forefront, wanting to talk about it and really normalize it and help support people who are grieving. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. Absolutely not. It doesn't mean that my own experiences of grief haven't been challenging. In fact, yeah, during my dissertation process, I was interviewing and talking to people about their experiences of grief. And I had a year of actually it was 6 months where, I lost Lucy, my dog, in January, and then Oscar, in another dog, in May, and then my husband almost passed in that June. So June of 2019. And he's okay. But it was like all of those experiences of loss while I was researching and studying loss. And I thought, why couldn't I have researched a different topic? Because really having my own experiences then again reminded me and brought me up close and personal with how tender and how difficult it is to navigate. Grief isn't easy at any time. However, the reason I timed this show the way that I did is that there are unique challenges that this time of year can bring. This time of year is unique. A lot of the focus is on togetherness, and grief can be wildly isolating and lonely. You might be seeing different media shows, commercials, stores, and displays that are all, families around a table, or all these kind of idyllic situations. And that might bring up a lot of sadness for those people who you aren't able to be with for whatever reason. There are traditions that happened in years past that maybe no longer continue, or perhaps, the person who was responsible for those traditions isn't with you any longer. And that can be painful. Oh, and certain smells, so there's holiday foods. Right before we jumped on, I was talking with Sierra, the producer, about a favorite food item at Thanksgiving, and my mother-in-law made cheesy potatoes, and man, they are my favorite. That is something that I really appreciate about the holidays. My grandma used to make potato soup, and simple recipe. And I've never been able to recreate it. And she was one of those like, oh, Terry, I just put a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And and I never got it right. I tried with another friend of mine, Kim, years ago to make potato soup. Both of us kind of had a hankering and thought, oh, that would be fun to make. And we agreed that it was missing something. And we surmised that it was missing love of the person who made it for us. So again, there's holiday foods, things that you don't really think about in the rest of the year. There's certain sounds, specific music. And talking about music, I mean, the songs are all, most of them are festive. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's the brightest, it's the best. And when you're feeling in some deep sadness or grief, that can be just such a stark contrast that the pain of that is really difficult. So certain things like these are only present during this time of year. And so you might get caught off guard by a song, a smell, or a sight. I was was pumping gas the other day, and they had Christmas music on, and I was slammed with this wave of emotion and thinking about my grandma. And you never know when it will come. So it can be really tricky, which is why I wanted to bring, some things to your attention. and maybe some practices that might support you during this time. I do want to remind everyone that grief isn't only experienced due to death of a loved one. And it can be kind of lost when you're experiencing other grief, because of course, grief due to the loss of someone important to you or a being important to you, very, very painful and immediate, and everyone kind of understands, oh yes, that's grief. But people who have suffered different losses, that could be the loss of a relationship due to a breakup or divorce, or even ending a friendship. And we don't really have a lot of language for ending a friendship. That could be a whole other topic, but a lot of pain with the loss of a relationship. So the person hasn't died, but who you were in relationship it does not any longer exist, and that can be really painful. The loss of a job, could be, termination or company closing, and again, rampant consumerism during this time. So that can be painful too if your financial status is challenged. And I know that with our recent move, we're and I'm building a business, and so I've had that conversation with most everyone. Okay, it's not presents this year, our presence is being back in Minnesota. But it is hard because I see things, and of course I want to buy them, and we're being told like, oh, this is a beautiful gift, or this is a fun stocking stuffer, and that could be really painful, an experience of loss if you're not able to do things in the way that you'd like to, because of finances or loss of a job. And then there's loss due to illness. So you might have a loved one who is living with dementia, Alzheimer's, or some cognitive issues. There could be loss of someone due to behavioral health disorder or even substance use. So the person is still there, but maybe not in the way that you know them to be. And that is, and can be really painful. It could be the loss of ability due to illness or injury. My husband, I know, struggled quite a bit after his motorcycle or dirt bike accident, because that was a big part of his identity for years, since he was 12. And after his accident, he made the decision to not dirt bike any longer. And so that had been part of his identity. And kind of grappling with, who is he now? How does he spend his free time? And he's found a great deal of love in wrenching on cars. So that's good, but it's not an easy process. So you could be dealing with the loss of your own illness or injury, or someone else in your life. Sometimes that's even the inability to drive due to complications of aging. That's a painful thing that many people go through, because it's not just about driving, right? It's like about autonomy and being able to do things for yourself. It can also be the inability to do physical activities, or hobbies due to arthritis or, other limitations. And that again could impact identity. Okay, so I'm this car guy, but now my hands aren't working. So I have to find something else to do with my time. There's a lot of grief right there. And I do have to mention that sometimes it's the good stuff that can bring up feelings of grief. And that doesn't get talked about, right? Because we're like, but it's a good thing. But there's something to be acknowledged. And I think that that's important. So feelings of grief of good things could be having children. You might grieve the loss of your, kind of sleeping in self. The self that was able to rest or go to brunch or out on a date at a whim. And of course, there's benefits, but to not acknowledge the grief that might come with good things can feel very alienating or confusing to people who might be like, well, I'm not 100%, or there's a little something. Getting married. I've heard this talked about a little bit more, kind of the single self, and merging and kind of considering another person. Again, great things, moving to a different state. Moving back to Minnesota has been a great thing for Charlie and I. And it's also, I have grief because there are people that I deeply love in Reno, and my experiences there were so, I mean, the growth and learning that I did and the connections that I have. And, thankfully to technology, I can keep up with those people. But it is hard. Leaving a job that you love for a different opportunity. I loved my work as a director at the Sanford Center for Aging. I was the director of the gerontology academic program. And the opportunity of moving back and starting my own business is wildly exciting. And there's sadness with leaving such a great organization. And I worked with amazing people. So if any of you are listening, I love you all. Okay. And then I'd like to just, have you reflect, and you could write to me and email me or, reach out on socials, but I'd like to know if there's any losses that you can think of or that you've experienced for yourself. Sometimes you might not even know or recognize that you're grieving. I had been part of creating a wellness center in Reno, and things shifted and changed, and it's all fine. But there was the summer when I kind of ended my involvement. I was having those like feelings of like, I don't know. And my husband kept saying, like, oh, you're depressed. I'm like, I know my own depression. I know my flavor of depression. This isn't depression. But I couldn't figure it out. It was like a meh or a just like low mood, something like that. And so I had, taught my last class at the beginning of July that summer. And, so this was going on throughout the summer, July, all of June. Oh, no, not all of June, but July. Doesn't matter. But July all the way till the end of August, I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I was doing a meditation, and all of a sudden it popped into my awareness, and I recognized, like, oh, I've been grieving. I've been grieving that opportunity. I've been grieving that it didn't turn out the way that we had all hoped or planned or dreamt that it would. And here I am, a grief expert. And I don't know why I do air quotes. I mean, but it is this, I study this, I talk about it, and I didn't recognize it in myself. So it might not even be gelling that you might have experienced a loss, and that's what's happening. And when I was able to name it and recognize it and bring awareness to it, then it opened up. Right. And I was able to, work with those feelings and bring mindfulness to my experience. Didn't make the grief go away, but it helped me understand what was happening just by naming it. Excuse me. The body actually might know that you're grieving before you do. I have a dear friend who, in December, both of her parents had died on the same day, 23 years apart, at the end of December. And there'll be times where she and I will be talking, and she'll be like, I don't know, something, I just don't, I feel low, or I feel this, or I'm agitated and I don't know why. And then because I'm very aware of the date, I'll say, do you think it's like the anniversary of your parents' death? And often it is. And so she's, so you might even be feeling like an unsettling or, numbness or challenge with sleeping or something like that. And that's the body recognizing before you do that, maybe that there's an anniversary or a loss that you're grappling with. So our bodies, and this is another, reason why I love meditation and mindfulness, because our bodies so often can hold this information. And by paying attention, then you can start working with it. So some typical grief responses are, sadness, numbness, confusion, regret. There might even be relief, anger, mood swings, pain in the body, racing thoughts, changes in behavior. And that could be like you might withdraw, or maybe there's some reckless behavior, fatigue, tears, change in appetite, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, kind of being, riding the waves of happy or sad memories. There might be feelings of guilt. And I'm naming all of these because, again, you might not be even recognizing what's happening in the body. And I want to normalize that these are all things that can happen with grief. And, research is interesting. Uh, so, how do I say this? In many research studies, they ask a series of questions and they are trying to pinpoint where you are in your depression. And so, often research will say that grief lasts 2 months, which is a little bit bananas, if you ask me, to use a technical term. Yes, you might be able to shower and go to work and, feed yourself or go to the grocery store. But it's not necessarily like, oh, so I've wrapped my grief up in a tidy little bow in these 2 months and now we're great. And I find that to be, especially when I've talked to people who are grieving, that's part of what I do, to think that there's a checkbox that we can go through and that, within 2 months' time, you're fine. And feelings do, change and shift. And there's a really great thing that I like to share when I talk about this topic. And if you Google old man on grief, there's just this beautiful, and it's not attributed to anyone, but it's this beautiful commentary on someone talking about grief and how it comes in waves, and it really does. And yes, people with depression can share some of these symptoms that I listed above. And depression does have symptoms that are different. One of the statistics, 40% of grievers do meet the criteria for major depression 1 month after their loss. 24% still meet the criteria after 2 months. And because of those similarities, if you are going to seek professional help, a bereaved person can't be diagnosed with the depression until 2 months have passed since their loss, just because there are a lot of similarities. And again, I want to normalize that, if it's years later and you still have some of these feelings, that can be normal. There can be complicated grief and chronic grief. And that, that's not really what I'm talking about here, but that is definitely, if you are experiencing that, please reach out and find support, because there is support out there for you. Another thing that I want to talk about is the 5 stages of grief. And so many people have heard of this, right? The 5 stages listed are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So it was never the intention of the author, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that these stages were perceived as a straight line. However, because we are human, we like things tidy, right? We want to say like, oh, so we've had denial. Okay, now we're into anger, bargaining, and depression. And then we're waiting for acceptance. But really, it weaves and like goes all over the place. And the research was initially based on interviews, and this was about 50 or so years ago, that she completed with people who were dying. So people who were diagnosed with a chronic illness. And it was the stages of dying. It was about their experiences of their diagnoses and facing mortality. Years later, she and another researcher, David Kessler, expanded the framework and applied it to grief to identify and understand what might come up as you mourn the loss of a loved one. But again, it is never meant to be linear. And I think because it's so pervasive in our culture, I mean, I've seen it on adult cartoons like The Family Guy. I've seen it mentioned in books or other sitcoms or TV shows, and they'll just kind of do this little like, oh, stages of grief. And what I like to talk about always whenever this topic comes up is that it isn't linear, and you can go through many stages at many times, and that is normal. So I do want to also mention that David Kessler has written a book. I was a few years ago. I don't have the date up, but it's called The Sixth Stage of Grief, and it's called Finding Meaning. And I did hear him on a podcast talking about this, and he had said that yes, people can definitely find meaning in grief. If you've had your own grief experience, you might be nodding and going like, yeah, I learned this about myself or about the world or about these things because of the grief I experienced, or I can help people in a different way because of the grief I experienced. But this is not meant to be an immediate thing. And I think we have that tendency to want to skip to the good part. We want to go to the silver lining. We want to go to, oh, there's a reason for this, or there's, something in this. And I do love his book. So The Sixth Stage of Grief, Finding Meaning, it's a great book. And to go back to what he was saying in a podcast, he did say that people would come up to him and say, okay, I've had this big loss. Like, when am I going to find meaning? And he'd ask them gently, I'm sure, how long ago was your loss? And they might have said things like 6 months or a month. And it doesn't come that quickly. So one part about bringing mindfulness to the experience of grief is to like understand and actually feel what is happening in the body. And so it's not skipping to the good part. It's not skipping already to the meaning of it. Although I think we want that, because then it would maybe make sense, like why we had that loss. And really, as humans, we do like to make things nice and tidy, and we want to make sense of our feelings, and it's normal, and it is a key part of our experience. So likely what your experience is not neat and tidy, nor will you only feel it once and move to the next experience. So whatever you're feeling now is okay, and it will change often. So historically, there's been the expectation again that the initial pain of grief should wear off in less than 2 months. And don't get me started on bereavement leave, because that is atrocious. I used to work as an HR rep for an engineering company, and the bereavement policy I thought was so shocking. And just as a stat here, so there's no federal law that mandates employers to provide bereavement leave to their employees. And depending on the company's policy, employees may need to use paid time off or sick time for bereavement. Less than 40% of US workplaces offer more than 3 days of paid bereavement. And so that would mean, someone could pass away and you might have to go back to work that week. And there's talk and, people, that I follow trying to change that to have more compassionate leave. But that is a challenging reality when you're experiencing loss. I do also want to mention a TED Talk that I really love, and it's titled "We Don't Move On from Grief, We Move Forward with It." And I think that's such a beautiful thing to remember. And that talk is by Nora McInerny, McKerney. And so those are two things. And I want to now, I'm looking at the time, man, I could talk about this forever. So bringing mindful awareness to grief. So you might find yourself getting caught up in thoughts or stuck in specific ways of thinking. You might find yourself thinking or living in the past, worrying about the future, which those thought patterns can result in emotional or mental pain or added suffering. So research does show that ruminating on the past can lead to depression, while worrying about the future can lead to anxiety. And this is where mindfulness comes in, and mindful awareness, right? So all we really have is the present moment. And we have these amazing brains. I love our brains. because we can think and plan for the future, and we can reminisce about the past. And those are beautiful gifts that our brains give us. And we can get stuck in those cycles. And so meditation or mindfulness, coming back to the present moment, actually helps support not getting caught up or not getting kind of carried away or swept away by those things. And so that means, when I'm present, so emotions might be arising. And I listed a lot of things that could be happening in the body: lack of sleep, lack of concentration. But you also might be having a lot of different emotions right now. Like you could be feeling numb. And can you give yourself permission to be what's coming up for you right now? And is it possible to allow whatever's here to simply be here without judging it or thinking that you're wrong for feeling the way you do, or even noticing like, oh, I'm feeling this way, and then noticing the thoughts that come like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be over this right now. And so really what it is it's an investigation and checking in with the body, because again, the body might know before you kind of consciously know, and bringing kind curiosity to whatever you're experiencing. That's the practice, right? It's bringing kindness to whatever is going on, and that can be really difficult because there's a lot of things that tell us we should be feeling a certain way. You should be over it by now, you should be blah blah blah, whatever it is. But the practice really is going like, ooh, I'm feeling this tension. What is this tension? Bringing curiosity, like, and maybe you notice like, oh, I have a furrowed brow or tightness in my throat or a pit in my stomach, any of those things in the body. And then your body always in the present moment, right? So you can spend some time and be like, okay, what's here? And can I allow this to be here? Talking about your experience of grief and loss can be an essential component of your healing. It is important to share your experiences with trusted others. So research shows that there's barriers to talking about grief, and some common communication barriers include what I had mentioned just now, thinking that you should be over it already. You might think this because others have said it to you, or it's the feeling that you get about your experience of loss. You might not want others to feel bad. You might be kind of in the habit of making sure that everyone else is okay. And so talking about your own feelings or what you're experiencing, you feel like you might be bringing them down. You might feel like someone wouldn't understand what you're going through, or you might not even want to appear weak or needy. And so knowing that it's important to talk to people, but also, as Brene Brown says, not everybody is entitled to your story. So pick those people wisely, and make sure that you have that feeling of safety when you open up. And then, contemplate or think about rituals that you could do that support your grief. This could be sharing stories, visiting meaningful places, listening to certain music, looking at photos and scrapbooks, writing. And I'll be talking about a writing prompt here. You could have parties to honor someone, and then again, mindfulness. So really you can have these ways to like connect and weave what you're going on into the present moment, so that as you're navigating it, and again, it's not getting through, it's not being done with, it's just setting things in place so that you're able to be with whatever's happening a little more skillfully. So I wanted to offer some tips for self-care to honor the unique healing paths that we all have. One of my favorites, and I've been doing this for years, when I have a significant loss, whether it's a relationship or, like when my grandma died, write a letter to the person or to the experience you're grieving. I like to set a timer for 10 minutes and then just write without censoring myself. So the trick with this is to keep writing. Even if you draw a blank, if you draw a blank, you can just write blah, 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 or this is stupid. Write whatever comes to mind. You might write about happy past memories. Maybe you might be feeling angry or regretful. So whatever is coming up, just keep going and writing when you think about this person. And there's no right way to approach this exercise, but it's just allowing yourself to be uncensored. So uncensored journaling can be supportive, and it allows you to tap into subconscious themes or insights. You could extend this by going back and circling all repeated words or phrases for additional insight. And again, always inviting curiosity and non-judgment to the party. A journal prompt that I found really powerful was the question, what's one thing you miss about how you used to be in the before times? And so that's before the loss. So and that's not just the loss of the person, but maybe the loss of who you were within that experience. And it's not just person. Again, it could be many of the other things that we talked about. You could dance your grief. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this really beautifully. And so you could pick a specific song or hit shuffle to move to whatever song starts playing. So often grief can get stuck in the body. Hands to heart center. I do this a lot. Research indicates that physical touch releases oxytocin, which is a type of hormone in the body that promotes positive feelings. So this provides a sense of security and soothes distressing emotions and can calm the cardiovascular stress. So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just hands to heart center. And I just saw this on Instagram. Andy Grammer spoke beautifully about going on the offense with grief. So buying breakfast for someone who reminds you of the person you lost, maybe doing something that the person loved, like if they loved bread, maybe set a day to go make bread and share that with other people. So like bringing kind of a sweetness and physicality to that loss. And how do you support others who are experiencing grief? You can text or write a note letting them know you're thinking of them. I like to include a no need to respond clause. Offer specific help. Saying, let me know how I can help can be overwhelming and put the decision on that person. And remember, it is different for everyone. You could invite them, if they're up for it, to tell you a story about the person or experience that they lost. If you knew that experience, you could share a memory of that person or thing. Sitting with the person. It's something so simple. You might be like, I don't know what to say. Just go sit with them, sit beside them. And if you talk about it, you talk about it. If not, you don't. That is a really powerful thing to be able to share with someone. And listen to what is most helpful for them, not what you think is most helpful. So that's, again, if you are supporting someone who is grieving. And if you are on the receiving end, that can require vulnerability. It puts us face to face with being loved and seen and witnessed, and it can be uncomfortable. So give yourself gentleness and allow people to support you if that's what you're needing. So again, it's kind of this give and take and being present to what is going on and being curious. So bringing that curiosity to yourself as well as to other people's experience. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to guide you through a mindful meditation. So during break, see if you can find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed for about 10 minutes. Thanks so much. We're back on Creating Connection with Dr. T. On this segment, I will be guiding a mindful meditation to support you during this season. Like I said, if you can find a place where you won't be disturbed for about 10 minutes, if that's not the case for you in this moment, maybe come back to it another time. And so, right, getting ready. Let's arrive and settle in this moment. Finding a position that feels supportive, where you can be alert yet at ease. Taking a few mindful breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Softening and expanding the belly. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. This type of breath tells the body that you are safe in this moment. Closing the eyes or lowering the gaze, whatever feels comfortable to you. You can continue the soft belly breathing, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth if that feels comfortable for you. Not trying to force anything, just allowing your breath to be at its own natural rhythm and pace. Making any adjustments to your posture so that you can be alert yet at ease. And as you settle and arrive in this moment, maybe taking notice of the body, points of contact with the seat or maybe the floor on the feet, the feet on the floor, and maybe noticing air temperature, heat or coolness. The body and the breath are great anchors of attention to the present moment because they're always in the present moment. You can never be in a future breath or in a past breath or in a future sensation or in a past sensation. They're always right here in the present moment. So if you find yourself and your mind really active and busy, either, thinking about the future or ruminating on the past, just taking a few mindful breaths or paying attention to sensations can help anchor you back in the present moment so that you have space and are able to respond versus react to the situation or thoughts or emotions that are kind of coming at you. So, again, breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing you're breathing out, allowing yourself to be here in this moment. When thoughts come, just notice the thoughts and gently come back to the breath or to the body, whatever feels most supportive to you. And I'd like you to bring your awareness now to the back of the body. Actually, paying attention to the back of the body can be a very grounding experience. So, noticing the back of the head, any sensations there, the back of the neck and shoulders. You might notice some tension or holding in this area, seeing if on an exhale or inviting the body to just relax or ease if that's possible. Noticing the back of the arms, maybe making contact with the chair or surface that you're on, or even the sensation of the arms being next to the body. Paying attention to the sensations or feelings of the back, the upper back, the middle back, lower back. And again, if you notice any tension, tightness, or holding, seeing if on an exhale, you can invite some ease or relaxation to those areas of holding or tightness. But you're not forcing anything. And again, when the mind wanders, just coming back to the sensations in the back of the body. Bringing the awareness to the seat, noticing where you're making contact with whatever surface you're on, the back of the thighs, the back of the knees, the calves, the Achilles, the bottom of the feet. Just noticing any sensations at the back of the body. Just bringing this sense of, having your own back in this moment, allowing yourself to give yourself the gift of your own kind attention and awareness, much like you would a dear friend. Taking a couple of moments to just breathe and experience whatever's happening here. And again, if emotions arise, hands to heart center can be really supportive. Even if it feels a little goofy, you might know that research supports that, if that's helpful for you. And if the mind gets carried away with thoughts or stories, acknowledging that and bringing curiosity and awareness to that experience and saying like, ah, yes, the mind is very active in this moment, or this is coming up for me. And then coming back to the body breathing or sensations in the body, wherever you can find kind of an anchor of attention and awareness that is supportive for you in this moment. That is what this practice is, coming back again and again to the present moment, giving yourself this pause in the day, an acknowledgement of feelings or whatever's occurring, and bringing gentleness and tenderness and compassion to whatever's arising. And as you feel ready, maybe bringing some movement to the body, wiggling the fingers and toes, or taking a stretch, whatever feels supportive. And if the eyes have been closed, opening the eyes, looking around the room that you're in. This is also a great practice of grounding and being present, is actually, paying attention to the environment, and maybe almost as if it's the first time that you've ever seen that environment. Thank you for that practice. And as we close, I want to remind you that each week I guide a free live meditation on Zoom every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, or 10 a.m. Pacific. You can go to my website, ccwithdrt.com, to reserve your spot. And that's a 30-minute practice. And we're not meditating the whole time. I'm usually reading something or sharing something that I think might be supportive for that week. And then doing a short meditation, much like you experienced here, but maybe about 15 minutes. So if you're new to meditation, or if you already have a meditation practice, it really is for everyone. And it's a small community right now. We had originally gotten started over the pandemic, but I'm growing the numbers, and I'd love for you to join me if that time works out for you. I also have meditations available on Insight Timer. It's an app, and I put new meditations up there now and again. Um, and what else did I want to say? Oh, and then for this month, I'm offering a free 10-minute call. So between today and December 29th, I'm offering one free 10-minute conversation. So we can do that on text, or we can do that on a phone call, whatever you prefer. So you can call or text 1-855-952-2241. 1-855-952-2241. And you can let me know a good time to contact you and your preferred contact method, whether it's a phone call or text. Again, this can be a lonely or challenging time of year, and so I wanted to offer that and make myself available just for a quick conversation, if that would be helpful or supportive for you. And as I will also list references. So as we end, I'd like to share a couple of my favorite quotes here about grief. There's an excerpt from the book Brave by Cheryl Strayed, and it was a guiding quote for me while I was completing my dissertation. If, as a culture, we don't bear witness to grief, the burden of loss is placed entirely on the bereaved, while the rest of us avert our eyes and wait for those in mourning to stop being sad, to let go, to move on, to cheer up. And if they don't, if they have loved too deeply, if they do wake each morning thinking, I cannot continue to live, well, then we pathologize their pain. We call their suffering a disease. We do not help them. We tell them that they need to get help. And if possible, bearing witness to people's pain, it can be really uncomfortable, right? And we're not always equipped to not be comfortable. And that's where mindfulness comes in as well. So if you are grieving yourself, or if you are supporting someone who's grieving, maybe just even acknowledging in your own head, like, oh, this is uncomfortable, or, oh, I don't know what to say. And then breathe. Just breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth, softening the belly, allowing yourself to be present. Because often that's what we need to give to ourselves, our own attention and presence. And often that is a beautiful gift that you can give to other people just by being near them. And that can help actually self-regulate. So, but it can be uncomfortable. And so there is no right thing to say. And if you're like, oh, I don't want to bring this up because I'll make them sad. Pro tip, they're already sad. So just, ask them how they're doing and if they're willing to share something about their experiences. And if you're on the receiving end, know that it can be wildly vulnerable to accept and receive support. Ask me how I know, because it is wildly difficult for me to ask for and receive support. And so you might even breathe with that as well and allow yourself to kind of, the gift, because, okay, just for a second, think about how good it feels to help someone that you love. Like, I mean, for me, I love that feeling. And so what's helped me try to shift that and allow people to be there for me a little bit more or differently is to be like, oh, well, maybe they feel as good as, to give help to me or support to me. So just a little, slide that in at the very last minute here. But that receiving is vulnerable, giving can be really lovely, and it can also be really, really uncomfortable. All of this is. And so normalizing that it might be uncomfortable, finding your feet on the floor, taking a couple of deep breaths, hands to heart center, just really supporting yourself when and how you can. Thank you so much for listening. And at the end of the month here on the 20th, as I mentioned, I will have a wonderful teacher and mentor, Aya Caspi. She'll be joining me to talk about nonviolent communication. Thank you so much for being here. And until then, be well. Thank you for listening to Creating Connection with me, Dr. T. You can join me by tuning in on the first and third Wednesdays every month at 10 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com, where we will navigate being human together. Being human means that we all have a body, and we will all experience loss, grief, and aging if we're lucky. Let's join together on this journey of exploration, support, and mutual learning. I love bringing people together, and on Creating Connection, we are a conversation away from understanding another person and, quite frankly, ourselves. For more information, visit ccwithdrt.com.